الرحيم. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
سل إماما عاش في العلم دهورا ودهور، يطلب العلم ببذل حتى ضمته البحور.
سل إماما عاش في العلم دهورا ودهور، يطلب العلم ببذل حتى ضمته البحور.
صابرا في العلم صبرا حتى سموه الصبور،
يخرج العلم بفأل مثل ريحان الزهور.
صابرا في العلم صبرا حتى سموه الصبور، يخرج العلم بفأل مثل ريحان الزهور.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور. كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور.
راقيا بالعلم نحو النجم مزدان شكور، رافضا كل التدني رافضا نفس الغرور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. ابن مسعود فقيه علم أحيا القفور، فإذا أعطاك رأيا كان سهما في النحور. ابن مسعود فقيه علم أحيا القفور، فإذا أعطاك رأيا كان سهما في النحور. وعلي ثم بالدين معاذ لا يبور،
اقرأوا التاريخ تروي عنه أفواه سطور.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
إن سألت عن إمام أو فقيه في الأمور، ابن عباس ترنم وسيبقى في الصدور. إن سألت عن إمام أو فقيه في الأمور، ابن عباس ترنم وسيبقى في الصدور.
فهو كالشمعة تذهب حتى تأتينا بنور، ساهر بالليل علم وبأوقات سحور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. إذ بكى النبي يوما سمعا صوتا جهور، يا أبي كم روت عنك الليالي والعصور. إذ بكى النبي يوما سمعا صوتا جهور، يا أبي كم روت عنك الليالي والعصور. أنتم اليوم كنبت قد علا فوق الجذور،
يا أساس الدين يا صرحنا يا صلب صخور.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Islamic OASIS Live. It has been a while. I hope and pray that everyone had an amazing Ramadan and Eid, inshallah Rabbul Alameen. Again, just saying it, it's been a week and a half, I know, but Eid Mubarak to all of you and your families once again, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. And we hope and pray that we see another Ramadan. So we make dua that Allahumma balighna Ramadan, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Now, brothers and sisters, subhanallah, we just went through Ramadan, and it was just as if it was something, and it was few Ramadans that we went through Syria, then, Palestine, Masjid al-Aqsa, we hear about Kashmir, we hear about, and subhanallah, in so many different parts of the Muslim world, and here we are again talking about Sudan. Although crisis in Sudan is not a new thing, But what we are seeing as far as the kind of bloodshed that has started, this was rare in Sudan, at least in the recent years. So to discuss this matter and to see what is exactly happening in Sudan, yani, what is the point of this conflict, who are the real players, what is being hidden, what is it that the Western powers or Western power maybe even is trying to hide in this case. It's very clear, brothers and sisters, that there is a lot of issues regarding Sudan. Its strategic nature, what has been happening as far as the revolution in the last few days, and last few months or years. Are we seeing someone trying to sabotage what was happening? For instance, what happened in Egypt, what happened in Libya, what happened in Syria, and is it same thing in Sudan, where a government or a army is trying to make sure that no one other than the army stays in power for the sake of colonial interest? So in order to discuss this, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we have with us Brother Yusuf Hanif, or also known as Abu Sinan, who's half Sudanese political activist and Dawah career, born and bred in UK, underwent some years of primary education in Khartoum North and lived there, has participated in forums and other political and Dawah activists in both in UK and Sudan, and currently resides in the UK. Brother Yusuf, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and your viewers.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Akhi, get us started on this. Yani, what is this conflict about in Sudan? What's happening in Sudan?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You couldn't have asked me a bigger question than that, to be honest. Maybe a bit of background, because I appreciate that you have a very wide viewership from around the world. So Sudan as a country was granted independence in 1956 by Britain. And before the British left, they did a few, they tried to organize it a bit on the way out, so at least they could maintain some of their influence and economic interest in the country. So they developed a parliament, they organized elections, referenda, and kind of trained up at least two major political parties before they left. And they had them vote on independence. And then they officially left and obviously remained. Politically remained, economically remained, some military presence as well remained. But within 2 years of that, that democratic rule, this new Sudanese republic, there was a coup backed by Abdel Nasser in Egypt, and the military came to power, and they stayed in power for a while, ran the country to the ground economically, and caused a revolution. People came out on the streets and put pressure on the army for them to step aside. And then those political parties came back again. And then they also ran the country to the ground economically. And that gave a justification for the army to do another coup, backed by Sadat this time. Sadat from Egypt again. And General Numeri ruled Sudan until the 80s, from the 60s to the 80s. Again, he ran the country to the ground. A revolution came out, and then he was pushed aside by his own defense minister, who then made way for the same old political parties to come back again, who only took him 4 years to repeat the cycle again, and then for General Omar Bashir to also do a coup and come to power. And he was, during his reign, they found oil, which kind of gave a bit of reprieve and a bit of breathing space for the Sudanese economy. So there was a short time of economic growth, which was obviously immediately met with American sanctions, using terrorism as an excuse, because Sudan was going in the opposite direction. as in it was actually improving when it should have been getting worse, as all the Muslim countries are supposed to, in the game of international politics. And the Americans forced, or I say forced, but it was almost voluntarily by the Sudanese government in Khartoum, but they had to force it onto the public opinion and force the separation of the south of Sudan in first having a referendum in 2005, having a peace agreement in 2005 where the rebel leaders of the south agree with the government in the center that in 5 years' time we'll do a referendum on separation, on secession, and that happened under international observance. And the south separated and took 3/4 of Sudan's oil revenue with it,
The
because
thing,
that's where the oil is.
okay, so
Um,
the way I understand it, Sheikh, is that in when so it seems like when 1956, I think what you said, the country split from Egypt, or
no, so it
1953,
split from Egypt 52,
52,
52,
52
52,
or 53,
53 is when it split from Egypt,
and
but it remained under British
so
control. Yeah.
we were just talking about the name Game of Nations. Rice
Yes.
Copeland, the very famous CIA manager, both in this area, it seems, he was the man that makes all of this happen, where Sudan splits, uh, Egypt is created, and he was, and then the so-called creation of Numeri, the first government of Sudan, basically. So it seems like CIA was involved from day one, from the creation of both Egypt and Sudan.
Yes and no. So it's not the CIA can't take all credit. It's the USA and the UK. Because remember, uh, Mohammed Najib and Abdel Nasser's coup in '52 in Egypt ousted the Egyptian monarch, which was a
Farouk.
British puppet.
Yes.
Yes, but and then that created an issue for both nations, the USA and the UK, in terms of who controls Sudan, because Sudan is uh, it's part of Egypt, but it did have a separate administration. I mean, the British actually separated its administration, so it was still part of Egypt, but it had a separate administration. So it was either clash over it, or just agree to separate. So Egypt became independent, but didn't take Sudan with it. So the separation was, if you like, working for both sides, UK and the US. So the UK at least keeps Sudan. But yeah, like I said, within 2 years of that independence, the army backed by Abdel Nasser in Egypt did the coup. So the whole struggle over Sudan began at that time between the foreign powers. But since Bashir's time, the USA has had near total control over everything that occurs inside and outside of Sudan. The separation of the South um, led to the economic downturn, which eventually led to the revolution in end of 2018. And that gave space now, the revolution in 2018, for those old political parties to come back again. And with them, the foreign backers, who are traditionally the UK and some of them backed by France and the other European countries. So yeah, the Game of Nations, during the entire Cold War era, you saw that happening. UK and USA and Soviet Union, the USA and France, over their old colonies. That kind of competition was going on for a while. It seemed that the USA had total control, and we're back here again.
So, Sheikh, this thing that's happening now, the conflict, is it? I mean, really an issue between Mati and Burhan? That really what's happening? Is this? I mean, what I at least read, I think this was in Telegraph, also talking that they're talking about that right before even the conflict began, there were meetings between these two in compounds. There were different compounds, it seems like, and then there were some meetings, both came together, and then this conflict begins. If I'm reading this right, would it be would it be a correct analysis, let's say, to say that this is to crush the real revolution that's happening in the country?
Oh, okay, that's a very deep question. I don't think they
Because
are
see,
thinking about the real revolution at the time right now. Okay,
because see,
because no, so to what you're saying, yeah, to what you're saying. I think it was a day or maybe 2 days before the the um, the conflict started, or this current fight started on the 15th of April. Um, they were both hosted by, as in they had dinner together, and they were both hosted by
the Americans.
Molifi. Yeah, by Molifi, who's he works under the foreign secretary, secretary of state in the USA. Yeah,
Yes,
so
and then
it
the
seems
guy,
that
I think the guy that was present, he was asked that question, and then he said something like, "Oh yeah, it did happen, but supposedly Hannity or Hannity, whatever, however you say his name, he wasn't there." And then, so the question I'm really asking, Sheikhi, is that, am I reading this right? That this conflict is a well-designed conflict created by the United States to make sure that the signing that was supposed to happen April 26th, where the civil government was supposed to come into to or at least some type of a fruition with this whole army situation going on. So now you created a situation where they can, all of the people who wanted, civil government or whatever it is, they're now, all of them are underground, or if not out of the country. And you are now basically at page one again.
yes, as the summary, that is correct. As the summary, that is correct. The December 2022 framework agreement was that agreement. All it did was get the military on one side and the FFC, Freedom Forces of Freedom of Change. That's a coalition of coalitions of political parties and militias, who I would say have long lost their backing of the street in Sudan. Um, they still have considerable support, but it's nothing compared to how things were when the revolution happened, end of 2018 and then beginning of 2019. So the issue I was trying to say earlier is that it's really between them. It's not really to do with the real revolution. The original revolution was about solving the economic problem. This has got nothing to do with that anymore. This is just about who is in charge of Sudan. That's all it is, and it's just between these two. That framework agreement set up workshops. They were supposed to come on in those workshops and agree on a new transitional setup
Well,
for
I think they're
Sudan
calling
between
it
the two of them.
Al-Wafiqa al-Dasturiya. This is for the 2023.
No, so الوثيقة الدستورية, okay, no, الوثيقة الدستورية is the first one they did, which was end of 2019. The last one is الاتفاق الإطاري, the framework agreement.
The framework, okay.
Well,
Yes.
that one was broken as well, but maybe that's a question we can go to earlier. But the way this was broken, those workshops. So one of those workshops, the last one actually, is the one in March, was on security, the security apparatus and the army, and there was a lot of let's say strong suggesting by the British embassy to restructure the army entirely. Because those workshops are attended by the UK, the USA, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, in addition to the UN and the African Union and IGAD. But the USA, and the UK are the main, and some people from the UN, they're the main actors here, because when you actually read those workshops and see the names of the people presenting, they're all English names, so they're either American or British. The people with the ideas are basically British or American. And so those details in terms of how the army should it be completely removed from power, completely sidelined. They have no influence. No ministries belong to them. They step aside from the economy controlling industry. That's how things are in Sudan. It's similar to Egypt. And there's this one issue about the incorporation of the RSF, the paramilitary Hemeti's people, as part of the army, not as a semi-autonomous branch. And on the other side, the British Army is really pushing for this total restructuring of the army, and defanging it completely. So you only have a pure civilian authority. But on the other side, they met resistance, and the USA, always with the USA, they always trust the armies. They're reliable institutions. They get things done. They're stable. You got Sisi in Egypt. You got Badra, and his successors in Pakistan. They're always counted on these kind of types. That doesn't mean the USA doesn't want a civilian democratic government. It does want that, but because it wants the democratic legitimacy that brings, and the revolutionary legitimacy that brings. But it doesn't want to move the army out of the picture, because the army gets things done. The army is reliable. The army isn't what's the word? It's not. It doesn't get kicked out through elections, for example. And it was the army that was doing the normalization with the Zionists. It was the army that was implementing the IMF prescriptions. It was the army that was that began the process of de-Islamization, or removing the Sharia, or what was left of the Sharia from Sudanese law, and so on and so forth. So that's something the USA
when you
wants to
talk
keep.
about the Sharia here, you're talking about from the time of Hassan al-Turabi.
Bashir.
Oh, Bashir. Okay, and then
Yeah, so Turabi didn't last long, by the way. Turabi didn't last long, because it was supposed to be Turabi coming to power with the support of Bashir, who's just a colonel in the army, but then Bashir couped him, and took over the country for himself. But it's the same background in terms of, like, it's still part of the Haraka Islamiyya, the Islamic movement. So he had to implement some Sharia rules. It was a mix. Sudan
was there anything Islamic about it? It was just the name, just like what we see.
I know there was a lot of Islamic laws, actually. I mean, if you were gonna count, like, the number of laws, it'd probably be, like, ranked very high. I don't know which one's more, Saudi or Sudan, but Turabi has this famous saying, "We are the only Islamic state in the world." He said back in that time. So it did, but it's pick and choose. That's why it's just pick and choose. We're gonna implement some social rules. Women have to dress a certain way in public. For example, there's hudud punishments. The children have to learn Quran in school, and Islamic history, and so on and so forth, and Seerah. And there's some economic rules. We're gonna implement Islamic rules in them, but we're also gonna tax the people. We're also gonna implement tariffs and custom taxes, which are not Islamic, and we're gonna allow for riba, but only Islamic banks, and so on and so forth. So you had that mix going on, but the de-Islamization process was just getting rid of what was left of the Sharia. That's what it was, because the USA wanted it to happen. That's what it was. So the army gets things done, the civilians don't. The civilians always end up disagreeing amongst themselves and paralyzing governments, and so on and so forth. So it's not that the USA doesn't want that, but it wants to keep the army. The technical, the very technical, if you like, detailed disagreement between the UK and the USA in terms of the visions for Sudan is really on the role of the army. And to stop the implementation of this agreement is this theatrical play that started off before the fighting, by the way. Because they were forced to sign it because there's pressure from the streets. It's been 3 years, there's no government, what are you doing? Hand over power, that kind of thing. So they had to sign it, but then try to cancel it through another way. And they started weeks before. Hemeti and Burhan Amin, the head of the armed forces and the head of the RSF, which is supposed to be a branch of the armed forces, are just attacking each other in public, just in the media, and on those issues that came up in the workshop, those technical disagreements. And it got to a point where, like, we don't want to sit, they don't even need to sit with each other, and accusing each other of things which they had done, and over their loyalties. But it wasn't working. Honestly, it just wasn't working. Everyone could see that any political commentator could see that they're messing about. They're trying to create an excuse to say, "Oh, we can't implement this agreement now because the army, which was one signatory, is now split into two. So how can you? There's two different armies now. You have to start again, the whole months of negotiation, because it's not one side anymore." And the reason why people saw through this is because they've done it before. That Utrecht history you mentioned before, they signed that, let it run for a while, and when they came to the point of handing power over, then they did a theatrical coup to get rid of it. So everyone saw that.
So everybody understood that it was a fake coup, even at the time it happened. It was just.
Yeah, but this is the thing. You could know that, but you can't do anything about it. because it's the army. Yeah, that's the thing about it. So
now,
they
Sheikh,
would
what's
once in a
happening?
while.
What's happening now? I mean,
Yeah.
of course, the Muslim blood is being spilt. And I think over a couple of, I don't know, 700-800 people killed, thousands injured. So is this? I mean, unfortunately, this drama for what? Where does this lead us?
Where did this lead us? Okay, so I can answer it two ways. So one is, where does America want it to go? Okay, and where should it go? It's a separate question, separate answer. So in order, because for the Americans, it's winning the war of public opinion. You have to create a justification for any changes you want to do, because they're dealing not with the opposition. Is not army. So long as you change the guy at the top, maybe assassinate him, then command just goes down. They're dealing with political parties. They're dealing with political parties who have influence over public opinion, who have access to media. So the Americans have to create justifications that either force them to be quiet, or to be quiet as in accept what's going on, or to win them over. And this fight's been going on for a while between all, not just the Americans, the British, and even the French and the Russians. Everyone wants to influence these political actors in Sudan and the people who support them. And there's many. There's many. I mean, Sudan has a lot of political parties and a lot of movements. So in order to do that, and when people were not buying the whole disagreement between the two of them, they had to make it believable. And you can't make it more believable than if they actually start fighting each other physically. And the damage that they've caused to the country makes people, a lot of people have said this, is like, no, but this can't be fake anymore. How can it be fake if this is what they've done to the capital city, for example, if this is what they've done to their own people? But if you just stay disciplined, you'll see that, for example, they didn't implement any of the rules which they did implement during the revolution, when they were trying to prevent the revolution from occurring in the beginning. For example, curfews, controlling where people go, none of these safety measures, none at all. Just random fighting different places. It's because they want the damage to occur. This is the point. They want the damage to occur to the civilians. Burhan didn't even he didn't fire Hemeti or remove him from his remove the ranks which he granted to him, because remember, Hemeti is not from the military originally. He was gifted his ranks in the army so that he can have a position, but he wasn't originally from his paramilitary force. He could have removed them, but he didn't. So if you follow things through, it seems badly scripted, but again, it's the army. What can you do about it? When they start fighting, there's nothing else no one can do about it. No one is more powerful than them. So it's forced some of those political figures to start saying, they've turned into wannabe mediators between Burhan and Hemeti. So the Americans have shifted political life in Sudan from, how do we get the army to hand power over to the civilians, and then just details of how that happens.
That's what I was saying in the beginning. That's what I was asking you in the beginning.
So they moved it now. So now those the people they're trying to influence from those political actors, some of them have now started to respond to these American games and start saying, we need to get these guys to stop. And they've offered mediation. They're calling for a stop to the war. Some people have been asking for intervention from the foreign powers, so on and so forth. So now political life in Sudan is just about getting these two to sit down and agree, which means the longer this lasts, this is the point, the longer this lasts now, the more likely people are just going to accept whatever outcome these two come to together. So they can come up with a completely new transitional setup, completely locking out the civilian aspect, and people will accept it. At least that's the American one, because then at least they can pick a civilian government of their liking, because it's just about them two. How do you get these two to agree? And so long as they agree and the fighting stops, that's all we need. We just need it to stop. Because like you said, hundreds of people have been killed, as in the known deaths. Thousands have been injured. Homes have been destroyed. Hundreds of thousands have escaped. Refugees either within Sudan or outside Sudan. My own family is in the Egyptian border right
now. I was listening to the American, I think someone from the security forces, whatever, he was giving a talk. He spoke for about good 30 minutes in the morning. And what he was saying is that, if anyone that wants to leave Khartoum or, we have our ports up. operating, and we're taking them out from the Red Sea to to Saudi Arabia to do this. We have everything. If anyone from any other country that wants to leave, we can. It seems like Americans are moving about very freely in this whole situation. They have no. I mean, they're running the show in many ways. I mean,
I mean, but they've been like that before. Honestly, American.
Do the people see? I guess the question is, do the people see through that? Do they? Because here's the thing. When we, I think the Muslims in the area, Sudan, I'm sure they see it and they're used to it. But when we talk to people in the West here, or when we talk, discussions, when we talk about the game of nations, the American game, the British game, the French, the Italians, all these people, meddling in the affairs of the Muslims and things like this. Why is it unbelievable to the Western Muslim here? I guess why don't they see this?
I think it just comes down to political experience. So, for example, in Sudan, I would say that the overwhelming majority of people can see through Burhan al-Hemeti and even people in the political parties as they have foreign backers. The only things people debate is who is behind who, but everybody knows there's someone behind them. Is it the UAE? Is it Saudi? Is it Sisi of Egypt? Is it the USA? Is it the UK? Is it France? Is it
But
Norway?
all of them are backed by US. I mean, what can Egypt do without the US?
No, but this is the point. So when talking to people in Sudan, it's more like getting them to see like beyond. So you can see Sisi talking a lot. You can see MBS talk. You can see Bin Zayed talk. But come on, these guys don't control foreign policy in the region. They always follow someone else's agenda. So in Sudan or Muslim countries, about getting people to realize that what you see in terms of the actual activities and statements coming out from these regional players and the money that they bring, because these are the financiers. They're the ones who actually fund and arm either side, whether it's the Egyptians or the Emiratis, for example, or the Saudis, or even Chad, or the Zionists as well. Because that's what you see. These are like real actions that makes them look like they are real actors themselves. But when you get down to, like I said earlier, when you get to the details of, okay, but what is the vision, the new vision of Sudan? Who's actually got the ideas? Who's got the agenda or the roadmap? Who's saying we're going here? This is how things should be, and I want you guys to help me get there. It's not these countries. It's almost exclusively US and UK, because the UN, obviously the UN isn't actually a state in and of itself, and the UN's only bringing ideas from again those countries. So it's just getting people to realize that when it comes that the political plan, that's more important than, for example, don't follow the money, follow the ideas. Who's got the ideas? And if you follow the money, you end up at the UAE, you end up at Saudi and Egypt and so on. If you follow the politics, you always end up at the UK and the US. That's where you always end up. So I comfortably, I'll say people in Sudan, they know that this is all foreign meddling, foreign interference, and it's out of our control, and it's a fight over power and who has control of Sudan, who has the most influence. Everyone can see that. Why do Muslims in the West not see that? I think it's just because they just haven't lived through. You haven't seen those. You haven't seen instances, for example, where a politician says something silly like, "Yeah, but it wasn't my decision," and he's the prime minister, and like, okay, but who's above you, mister? Who's above you exactly? Or but for Hemeti says this a lot because he's not really a man of much intelligence. He says a lot. He goes, "No, I didn't say that. That came from the Americans, or the Saudis told me to do this." He actually makes statements like these. So even Bashir said it once. Bashir said it. He goes, the Americans asked me to separate the South.
And it was Bashir that it seems like he's the one that gave them the post anyway. They bought him. The two generals that we see today. I mean, both of them were, I think, appointed by Bashir. No.
Yeah, they're both like his protégés, apprentices, and they're both responsible for the massacres of Darfur as well, under Bashir's orders.
Let's go on these
two specifically.
On the resources end, Sheikh, it seems like Sudan it exports the biggest export is gold. It exports gold and
Export is a
then
very polite word. Export is a very polite word. Sudan's gold is stolen. It's not exported.
uh-huh. So so
Yeah.
let's say you're talking how much gold? Do you know? And do you have any numbers in mind that how much gold actually leaves Sudan?
I think that there's like official numbers, but they're always very small compared to because what's his name? Hamiti, for example. Hamiti, he owns gold mines. Or own again is very polite. He controls gold mines in Darfur. Sells them to the black market, and a lot of it ends up in the UAE. Most of UAE's gold comes from
Yeah, it seems
Sudan,
like
and it comes
yes.
from him.
Most of the biggest buyer seems to
Yeah,
be UAE.
yeah, and so what I'm saying is it's not Sudan's gold is stolen. It's not really exported, and not just the gold actually. It's many of the other
Like oil,
minerals.
for
No
instance,
number
it
comes.
seems like it has almost 1 billion barrels of oil, which means that can last
Yeah,
about 100 years.
yeah, but the thing is with the oil is so the sale of oil is obviously Sudan is sanctioned and blocked through by the US from a lot of so it has very few relatively I say because if there's a will there's a way but relatively few compared to other countries in terms of who would buy from them and then when they lost the majority of the oil vast majority of oil because it was in the south and that went to
Mm.
South Sudan and
Yeah,
then
it seems like
South Sudan went into its own civil war.
yes.
So the whole idea was, they will still, because South Sudan's landlocked, so the oil still has to go through Sudan to get to international ports. But that didn't happen because South Sudan collapsed. So they lost how much they have, as opposed to how much they can sell. The two different issues, and that's mainly down to the sanctions. Or to be honest, I would put it more down to the lack of will in the government because America put sanctions. So then let's not find ways around it. Let's just do whatever America tells us to do to lift it, get the sanctions lifted. That's the mindset.
To just get that. Subhanallah. So, Sheikh, now, as far as the strategic nature of the country, right? I mean, you're talking about a port. You have the Red Sea that goes, I guess, all the way up to Europe. You have obviously Saudi Arabia right across south. It goes to Eritrea or Ethiopia. Sheikh, how? I mean, I didn't know about. So it has ports. It has very important strategic ports. It seems.
Yes, it does. Not as important as some other ports in the Red Sea. The main port, obviously, is in Port Sudan, which was built by the British for the express reason of stealing stuff out of the country during that time.
Mm.
So it has a potential to be very strategic. It's the fact that it wasn't really using it much, but that's the whole point of strategy. It's the capability. I want the capability to do something. Doesn't mean I need to do it right now. I just need to have access. I need to have the position. I need to have the higher position. I need to have the access to the resource. Doesn't mean I'm actually going to consume it. So that's the strategic fight over Sudan. So for the Americans, they have a port in Djibouti, which is very close, and then they didn't need to have any other ports in the region because they control the governments anyway. So Egyptian government, Sudanese government, Saudi government, so on and so forth. And with that, they have the ability to deny other countries who want to have a strategic, um, like
Relationship with Sudan.
have any strategic assets in the region. So through its control of the government, it can block the Russians from getting, for example, a port in Port Sudan. It allowed, for example, the Turks to buy a port. I don't know what they did with it because it's a few years now and haven't heard anything from it yet. So it might have been a wasted investment. So it's that capability. I have the capability. I have the ability to choose what to do. That strategic value of Sudan because it's Red Sea. It's also now a river. It's also in the middle of the east of Africa. It borders many countries, and culturally, it's integrated into obviously the Arab world, the Muslim Ummah, and extends further into the Sahel region, Chad, Niger, so on and so forth. It's important just to have access to Sudan to use it when they need to use it, which is why, for example, if you look at like the economic footprint of the USA and the UK is very small in Sudan. There's very little they consume from Sudan. There's more uh, the Russians take gold from there, for example. The Chinese have investments and land there. Even the French have investments and land there. Lots of the Gulf countries, they have land on the Nile River where they use for agriculture. Um, the US and UK they don't have much, but they're at the forefront of the political struggle, because if they control that, they control everything else. So that's the thing about Sudan. It's a strategic location. It's a strategic, culturally, it's very strategic as well. So controlling Sudan is very important, which is why maybe it might come as a surprise to many people in the West why it's become such big news over here. That's because it matters to the American government. It matters to the British government, even if so a lot of people have never heard of Sudan before.
Sheikh, so okay, so how are the Muslims of Sudan? How I think what the Muslim population is about 70% of the country, no? Or is it more?
It's more 70% if you're gonna include the south with it, I think. But these are old numbers, very old stats.
So south, when we talk about south, meaning Darfur area. Yeah. Okay.
No, so south is now South Sudan now is a separate country.
Yes.
In 2011, it's separated from Sudan.
Right.
Darfur is in the west.
Okay. So you have South Sudan, which is also Muslim. What is the population of this area?
So South Sudan is mixed between Muslims, Christians, and I think they would call them animists, as in each tribe has its own religion. Mushrikeen, basically. The political weight and authority is in the Denka and Nuer tribes who are Christian. So there's no outright majority, but between those three groupings, it's probably Christian, Muslim, and then Mushrik in terms of the number of people. But again, that's based on how things were when the separation happened. But since then, obviously, there's been a civil war. Nobody really has numbers. Nobody really knows what happened demographically. People be moving around. So Allahu A'lam how things are. But that's how it was. So before separation, it's the southern region which had the largest number of non-Muslims. Now, what is now called Sudan, it's definitely over 90% in terms of Islam. Definitely over 90%.
What is called Sudan, not South Sudan, or just Sudan in general?
Yeah, okay. Not South Sudan. Yeah, so without South Sudan, it's over 90%.
Is there a potential for what's called Sudan today to even split further? I mean, can that happen?
Oh yeah, 100%. No, 100%. So before Bashir went, I'm talking about how reliable the army is for the USA, because the USA, they had lots of visits, important diplomats. Even so, this is Bashir's time, i.e., sanctions, and there's no ambassador. There was no ambassador. They had an embassy, but there's no ambassador because they don't have that level of relations. Even though it's the biggest embassy in the Middle East after Iraq, it's basically a military headquarters, CIA HQ. So this is Bashir's time.
I'm sorry, where is that again?
In Khartoum.
In Khartoum.
US embassy in Khartoum.
Yeah. Wow, so biggest after Iraq.
In the Middle East, yeah, in the Arab region, yeah. And yeah, Iraq is basically a fortress. The American embassy is a fortress. It's not really an embassy.
Wow.
So there, during that time, they started this thing, yeah, which they called Masarat al-Khamsa. Let's say the five I don't know, paths. Let's say, I'm sure there's an English translation for it in some UN diplomatic document somewhere. But let me just call it the five paths, Masarat al-Khamsa, which was to do with the government in Sudan coming to some sort of a new setup with 5 regions in the country, 5 mega regions in the country, to give them more autonomy, just like they gave the South. And this was all managed and supervised by the USA. And it's part of those things which the USA was asking of Sudan to do, and the Sudanese were Sudanese government, Bashir's government were trying to please the USA by giving it to them. But obviously, they had to go slowly because of public opinion. So there was Darfur was one. There's South Kordofan and the Blue Nile state together. There's the North, the east, and then the center, as in Khartoum, the Khartoum area, Khartoum, the state of Khartoum, because it's three cities. So they had begun this, and they created they just formed these imaginary oppositions, people to negotiate with from those particular regions. And it didn't seem like there was any, apart from Darfur, where there's an actual conflict going on, but that conflict was started by foreign powers as well, and it was armed and started by foreign powers. It seemed that they were creating a problem that didn't exist before. But the whole move to try and split Sudan into 5 countries exists before the revolution, and it's more plausible now, especially for Darfur specifically, because Hemeti is from Darfur, and Hemeti has the nucleus of an army. He can be handed Darfur over, and he can rule it. So especially now with the conflict with Burhan, the head of the army, it's very easy in a few months' time for them to say, you know what, there's no way, no negotiations ever going to work between us. The only way is for us, everyone to go their separate ways. That's the only way, and then we'll have peace that way, and Darfur becomes a separate country. It's very plausible, and that will be done under international supervision. They're going to
So
be there.
you
American diplomats
expect
will be there.
you expect the conflict to continue on for a while.
I mean, if
I mean,
America gets what it wants, because that's how the USA is speaking. It's calling it a civil war when it's not a civil war yet, but they want it to be. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So and it's going to take time. They say it's going to take time. Which
Sheikh,
means
I
they
mean,
want it to
this
take time.
like when the South was created, of course there was the United Nations, the AU was involved in this, and of course 100% the US was utilizing both of these institutions.
Yeah,
to create
US, UK,
whatever it
and
could.
Norway for some reason. Yeah.
So now in the so I guess I'm trying to figure out. I mean, what happens? Does this have the potential to go further than Sudan? I mean, can it go into? Is there potential for all-out war in the whole region? I mean, because it's not like Ethiopia is stable.
No, but yeah.
And is it right for me to ask that even Ethiopia in some ways was stabilized by the Sudanese army?
It depends what you mean by stabilized, because the Sudanese army helped Eritrea become independent from Ethiopia.
I guess I'm saying, yeah. Oh, okay. I'm saying Eritrea. I mean, I guess it seems that it did play a regional role in some ways, and now
it does. Yeah, but the Sudanese army plays a regional role. Yeah. So the whole separation of Eritrea from Ethiopia was purely an American want, and the Sudanese army did it for Bashir did it for the USA. Got no credit for it. There was nothing in return. It didn't seem. Maybe regional clout, perhaps, but it doesn't. I mean, it's a rival institution, and it can play a regional role. But it only plays a regional role if it is a unified country. If it's a big, powerful country as it is now, it can stand toe-to-toe.
The size of Sudan in general is as big as Europe.
Yeah, it's very half of Europe, Western Europe, all can fit in Sudan. But obviously, if Sudan splinters into smaller countries, then it loses that. So, from the US perspective, it's what do you want? Do you want a powerful Sudan that can dictate what goes on, stands toe to toe with Ethiopia, doesn't come under pressure from Egypt or Saudi or the Zionists like it has been in the past, or do you want a smaller states, smaller manageable states? And it seems the path the US has been taken since at least 2003 is Sudan should be split into smaller countries. But that's the neocons that's their thing anyway. Split Iraq into smaller countries, split Pakistan and create divisions. It's part of the whole reshaping the Middle East, which America has been trying to do for a while now. So I think that's where they're going. That's where they want to go. Obviously, we don't want that to be the case. We don't want it to end up that way. And there's nothing to say that what America wants has to occur. It can fail.
How can that change, Sheikh? How? I mean, because the people don't have a say. It seems maybe they do. I guess that's a question for you. What role can the masses actually play, and have they? Well, they tried to play some role, but it seems like they really didn't have any ideas as far as what to do with Sudan. So when you say it doesn't have to go the direction the U.S. wants it to go, then what is this? What are you? I mean, what are you saying?
Right. So no, this is a good question. Um, the the reality is, the path to power is the military, which is why
Which is split.
the no, the RSF is a paramilitary group. It wasn't originally part of the army anyway.
So hold on. So if there is even a split, let's say if there is an actual split, if it goes further split, the original or actual army of Sudan stays the same, remains the same. Is that?
Oh, if it's split into 5 countries, you mean?
I mean,
If Sudan, if it's
I'm sorry,
yeah,
you're
if
looking
Sudan
at almost maybe 3 countries now, at least now after this conflict.
okay, so you're being generous with only Sudan, South Sudan, and
No,
Darfur. I'm
I'm just
saying
saying. Okay, you have.
after South Sudan, they want to make it into 5 other countries extra to South
Okay,
Sudan. But
but
okay, let's say it's just
I
three
guess what I'm
countries.
asking
No,
is
yeah.
if
So
this
people,
if this goes
yes,
on
yeah. So
like this.
soldiers and officers from Darfur would be leaving the Sudanese army and join Darfur. That's what happened in the south. Southern officers and soldiers, they were forced to become part of the army of the south. Uh, um, they were part of the north. Yeah, so the Sudanese army will shrink if that happens. Yeah, but we're talking about right now. Okay, as things are right now, the path to power is to the Sudanese army. They are the only ones who can secure the country if they want to. They are the only people who can stop the foreign interference, actually, because they're the only people who can't kick all the ambassadors out and all the NGOs out. They're the only people who can do that. And the fact that they're still in power and the civilians are trying to agree to a power sharing with them and get them to transfer power also shows that they have the power um, uh, in Sudan. So any change, any solution is going to have to be something to do with the army, i.e., reforming the army, changing the army, a coup within the army, something along those lines. So the people of Sudan, they understood that the level of awareness that exists in Sudan is like a combination of Arab Spring because people were learning from what was going on around them, which is why when Bashir was removed on the 11th of April 2019, his defense minister came out and said, "Yeah, we've removed him now. You know, we've responded to the people's desire to get rid of him, and now he's gone. And we're going to do a transition and have elections later on." People stayed in the protest, and where was the protest? Outside the HQ of the army. It wasn't at the presidential palace. It wasn't at the parliament, because everybody understands that's where the authority is, and they're the real power. We saw what happened in Egypt. We saw what happened in other countries. They're the real power, authority. So that pressure that they created, millions of people in those protests, revolution, that created a movement within the army because it created there was a lot of rumors, but obviously there's no smoke without fire. There was a lot of rumors during that period, that revolution period, of failed coups that were occurring, and I'm 100% sure that many officers were trying to do coups because they felt, oh, the people are on one side, but the people at the top are holding on to power and sticking with Bashir, and they felt that pressure and they had to make a change. So, which is why the army then had to control that and do a control, as in the top brass of the army, Bashir's inner circle. They had to do a controlled transition, and that's what we've been. It's just a controlled transition, because they want to give power. So people can put pressure on the army and cause change, but that's the point. You have to cause change in that way, and the way things are, Burhan and Hemeti have proven themselves to be. This isn't the first time. Like I said, these two individuals specifically are responsible for many massacres that happened in Darfur from 2003 onwards. They don't have an issue spilling blood. They they don't care about the people, honestly. Um, and they will do anything for the Americans. They have been doing anything during the last 3 years, anyway. So they have to be removed. And I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble saying this, but it's general sentiment in Sudan. People make a dua that they kill each other accidentally or something along those lines because they have to
Oh.
remove. If they don't remove, nothing will happen. It's like the battle, the war of Ba'ath before Muhammad moved to Medina. where it just happened to be the case that the leaders of Al-Aws and Khazraj just massacred each other, and the next generation felt, well, we don't want to live like that anymore. They were looking for a third way. So that can happen, but that needs to happen. The way forward is for people to not fall for the traps, the public opinion traps. The whole, for example, the current one, which is, oh, you just need to get these two to mediate and just stop the war, just stop the war, just stop the war, just stop the war. That's all it is. So that these two, whatever they agree to, becomes a new setup of Sudan, and people just live with it. And then beyond that is to put pressure on the army again, say, well, it's not your job to rule the country, it's your job to protect the country. Your job is to protect us, means kick out the foreign interference, because all of our problems are because of them. And then let us choose our leaders. But don't allow, again, foreign interference also means that don't allow those foreign puppets from the civilian side also to come to power. So there's a lot that needs to go by. As a summary is that foreign agents need to be removed in the
Sheikh,
army.
even the so-called democratic forces within the country, I've heard, I mean, it seems like most of them are also controlled. There's a lot of control over them from the foreign powers. I mean, if not all of it.
Yeah, all of them. All of them. All of
Okay,
them.
so how
And they're
do
the
you,
people, and they're the main target of these American games, yeah, which is because they're trying to win people over to their side. And also from the European side, they're also trying to influence people. It's kind of fluid in that case, but there's certain people who are, and certain political parties who are fixated in terms of their alignment. And these are like some of the old parties who were there before the British even left Sudan. And there's people in between who are part of the Freedom Force. The Forces of Freedom of Change is a coalition of coalitions, so it's made up of many political parties, and they're not all
right? There
exactly on the
doesn't
same
seem
page.
to
And
be there's no
they've already
central
split.
leadership.
They've already split once. So there's two FFCs at the moment, anyway. And it can happen again. That's the nature of pragmatic, interest-based Machiavellian ends justify the means kind of politics. That's the kind of people they are. So they're primarily the people the Americans are trying to win over or fool, and they need to go as well. They can't be. This power can't go to them either, because the power goes to them. It just means the control of the country will still be for the foreign powers, whether it's Britain or America again, because America America has the ability, obviously, to force itself upon nations, because it is the leading country in the world, so it can force countries to do what it wants without them doing
So
it voluntarily
what's
anyway.
happening, Sheikh? Do they just directly come in and just buy people, buy generals,
No, it depends. No, it depends on the person. It depends on the person, on the political party. So there's some people who they have personal ties with foreign ambassadors. I mean, it's silly. Wallahi, it's silly how staff in the American embassy, British embassy, or the German embassy, and so forth, they just walk around the country. They visit. Um, they do these cultural. They run these cultural events. So the state doesn't even know what they're doing. They hold meetings with opposition political parties. They were doing that even during Bashir's time. These are supposed to be foreign dignitaries, so we're supposed to interface between state to state, but they go and talk to people in the opposition. They go and talk to people from the militias, the rebel militias, who from the outer regions. And they were amongst the protesters during the revolution. The British ambassador at that time, not the current one, at that time was a Muslim guy. He says he's Muslim. Arfan Sadiq of Pakistani heritage. And yeah, he was even leading some of the protesters in Salah during the revolution. So there was they go deep. The Americans were meeting Sufi tariqas, the imams of Sufi tariqas, in their mosques.
Oh, wow.
So what's this got to do with you, honestly? So the level of the relationships these embassies have, and it now makes sense why America has such a big embassy in Sudan. It's on that level of personal relationships, and there's a personal trust element, and there's for others it's just benefit in terms of, well, you want to come to power, I can get you to power. So long as you're on my side, I will get you there, that kind of thing. So for some of the political parties who are, let's say, fringe, the only way for them to ever see the light of a ministry or position in the Sudanese embassy abroad or something along those lines is if um, the army does get restructured and has to step away from all of these institutions which it controls, because that frees up those jobs basically. Sometimes it's just that simple. It just frees up those jobs. So then, who's going to get me there? It's the British, the British, and they're the ones who are saying, restructure the army, put them out, push them out. So then these guys become activists on the ground, really pushing forward for this. And you really ask them, why do you want this plan? Why do you want to restructure the army like this? All they do is just parrot stuff other people said. Just parrot what others say. They don't have any original ideas themselves. And for some people, it's not just that they just fall for the tricks. Like I said, the people who are they are also being influenced in terms of their behavior because they have very low political awareness, or they're just pragmatists. So they're very easy to break under pressure.
Sheikh,
The
I
end
guess
result is the same. The end result is the same, like which is the foreigners got their way. So it doesn't matter how.
have
There's
they?
many tools for it.
Let me ask you this: as I guess one of the last questions here, have they? Do you see? I guess the political activists. I mean, you're one of them. But let's say the majority of the political activists on the ground, have they looked at what has happened in Egypt and what has happened in Syria, for instance, and what in Libya and Tunis and these areas? You think they learned anything from that, or the foreign that when you don't have a clear vision, when you don't have a clear ideological vision, let's put it, and you have to be very frank here, do they not see that? Okay. What are they learning from what's happening, or are they not learning? The people of Sudan, are they studying what's happening around them?
No, so some lessons have been learned and some lessons are not. And that's down to, I'm going to have to say this again, there's a very sick mentality which is from, its legacy from the colonial period, in my opinion, which is that we can't do anything ourselves. We're disorganized, chaotic, weak, so on and so forth. We need foreign assistance. Yeah, that we need foreign assistance. Like we need help.
This is just the Sudanese thing to do, or something?
No, this is across the Muslim world. You see this, but I'm saying that there's a political culture in Sudan that doesn't exist in some other countries who have been military dictatorships from the beginning. For example, there's no political life in Egypt, for example, but Sudan did from the beginning. So there's this. The way to do politics is build up a name for yourself and then find a foreign backer. That's basically it.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's the way it works. So that. So even activists who are anti the previous regime and who don't trust the political parties, like established parties, they end up practicing the same kind of politics. So even if they've learned some lessons, so for example, people definitely learned that Bashir is just the face of the regime. He's just the head of the regime. He's not all of the regime. So when he was removed, people didn't accept it and say, "Oh, okay, that's fine." People still stayed on the streets, and that forced his second in command to also resign the day after because people just didn't buy that. So that was learned, for example. But then, unlike Syria, you have all nations in the world offering to help you. And if the kind of politics you've learned is that unprincipled, shortcut to power kind of politics, a lot of people start falling over for it, and especially when they come and they look very genuine and they can fall back on decades of condemning the previous regime, and they become very believable. In Syria, everyone in the world left them alone to be killed by the Russians. So it's very different. People in Sudan were given hope. They were given a rope as opposed to being punished like the.
Why is that? That's very interesting point you make, Sheikh. Why is that? Is that because of the regional, just the kind of role Sudan can play, the strategic nature of Sudan, so they don't want long-term chaos inside this area? I mean, what?
No, they definitely want chaos. No, they want controlled chaos, but no, it's a different reality. So they deal with it differently. That's all it is. So the Syrians was a more unified front. It was more Islamic. So it was dangerous, very dangerous. So they had to be punished for it from the point of view of the international community. Syria wasn't just wanting to be an Islamic. I said they had Islamic laws within it. It wasn't seeking to just be one nation state out of many nations. It had the potential breaking the international order, making it dangerous for everyone, not just the USA, dangerous for the Russians, dangerous for everyone else as well. Anyone who is benefiting from the current international order, post-World War II order. Syria was like the closest threat to something breaking borders, for example. So with the Sudanese, it's pretty obvious the political factions are not on the same page anyway. They've came together reacting to a revolution that happened, and in reality they're not the same, and they're very different, and people can be bought, and they have very different interests. So it's very easy to play around with them, those political parties at least, and within that you can create this kind of mess. So Sudan's got this political mess. There's lots of political parties, lots of activists, lots of people who get airtime, and you just get lost in like the sheer number of names of people, and you don't know who's who anymore. The only people, but you kind of get an idea of who's important because Al Jazeera will read them more than once. So that guy's probably important, but he's not. It's who Al Jazeera wants you to think is important, for example, and likewise. So it's a different reality the way they're dealing with Sudan. They do want it to be chaotic. They want it to be a controlled chaos, but we don't need to let them do that. And the solution is through the Sudanese army. Honestly, there's nothing else, because now it's chaos. You need order, you need discipline. Now it's foreign interference. You need someone to secure the country, kick them out. And the only institution that can do that is the army. But the army is obviously is itself penetrated by this sick mentality. And it's not just a sick mentality where they're just people who they just got tired of being principled and now they just want easy way out. No, these are people who have blood in their hands, who actually work consciously. They've been bought by foreign powers. These people have to be removed. They're enemies of the Muslims. They're enemies of the deen. They're enemies of this ummah. They're enemies to the people of Sudan. They're on the other side. So they have to be removed, and that can only come from within the army. There has to be.
Sheikh, I mean,
there has to be some.
How about the I guess the sentiment for Islam? What is the sentiments for Islam in the country?
So the sentiments for Islam are very strong until Bashir did a lot to ruin it. By claiming to be an Islamic state, by talking the talk at least, and looking it, but then in practice being very oppressive, in practice running the economy to the ground, in practice being very corrupt, just handing ministries and jobs to and favors to people whom you like, and family members, and the son of that guy, and that guy he wants a job. Okay, let's just kick someone out from his role and give it to him, that kind of thing. And the money they were making off the back of the people, it left while they will still come up and use all the Islamic rhetoric and I'm talking about like proper Islamic rhetoric, and talk about munafiqeen, the people who are going against them, and traitors, and we're the only people standing up to the West and stuff like that. It left a bad taste in the mouths of a lot of people, especially from the younger generation. It's like, this is people who were born, for example, during the Bashir era, is like, this is how, if this is Islam, we don't want it, kind of thing. So the revolution didn't have a very Islamic overtone compared to Syria. Even Egypt was a lot more Islamic than, and Tunisia a lot more Islamic than the Sudanese one, because it was a rebellion against those Islamists who were given 1 year in Egypt and given a little stint of seats in parliament in Tunisia, and they were just kept out of power afterwards. They were the people, or their ilk were the people, not the Brotherhood themselves, but people who were part of the mega coalition they had in the 80s. They were the guys around the country, and if that was Sharia, we don't want that kind of thing.
So Ikhwan was the Brotherhood, or Ikhwan was part of? Were they played again? I mean, they were played in Egypt, and then it seems like they were played again in Sudan.
No. So there's the Islamic movement was a coalition, and the Islamic movement, Al-Harq Islamiyya, and within that was Al-Jabha, the Islamic Front. That's Turabi's people. Within that was Muslim Brotherhood as well. But then the Muslim Brotherhood separated from that before Turabi came to power. But well, I mean, the pragmatic approach, the pragmatic Islamists, so-called Islamists, those the pragmatic Islamic groups and parties. That's what rules Sudan. Yeah, that's what rules Sudan. So Muslim Brotherhood has been in opposition actually for a long time now, opposition to Bashir. Um, the the issue, Muhammad. Yeah, so the sentiment of the people the Islamic sentiment took a hit during the revolutions period. It
Okay.
allowed some of the leftists and the atheists to come out, rear their head, be a bit more brave. And when during the first Wathiqa Surya, the first transitional agreement, which the army then cancelled through the coup, the fake coup, um, there's some really disgusting people, wallahi, who are in government, who were very overt in speaking against the Quran, sometimes even making fun of it or some of the ayat in it. It seemed like they were on this vendetta. It's the kind of mentality ex-Muslims have. They have this inexplicable hatred for all Muslims and everything Islam, and it's like they're trying to take revenge from something. And the longer they sit in power, the longer they were provoking the Islamic sense of the people, the more that destroyed the veneer of, oh, these are the people who did the revolution. These are our revolutionary leaders, which is what the army wanted. Anyway, one of the tactics was would let some of the worst people take some of the ministries. Worst people, as in worst, as in very, very leftist, very atheistic. From amongst the FFC people in their negotiations, let this guy take the ministry and so on and so forth. Because their perspective is he's going to make people hate the civilian political parties, and they did that. So now it's very, I would say, if the pendulum had swung away from Islam in 2019, it's swinging back now. And it's something the army likes to fall back on, but very cautiously, because it knows America doesn't want it. America wants liberalization. But if you want to, in Sudan, you can make a strong argument saying, but these people are trying to change our identity, trying to change our culture. Look at how anti-Islamic they are. It's a very strong card in Sudan. Because even the people who went on the streets, they didn't go out the streets to cancel the laws on public. They call them like the public modesty laws. They didn't go to the streets for that. They didn't go to the streets to cancel Quran classes from primary education. That's not what they went to the streets for. And all these people did was that they didn't solve any economic issue. That's all they were focusing on. So the army is in this situation where most of the people backing the army now between the conflict were saying we're sticking with the army, and they use the slogan is Shaban Wahid Jishan Wahid, one people, one army. Who's getting behind the army? It's the fact that the army still has remnants from the previous regime. Nobody likes the previous regime, but at least they are not as bad. We got to this point now. After the revolution, people have started to look back and say, things weren't that bad before, and they were very bad before. It's just things have become a lot worse now because of this foreign interference.
Subhanallah. Sheikh, do me a favor. I mean, if you can, we have literally 3 minutes. So in 3 minutes, or at least take 1.5 minute to summarize. Where should we be going? What should we, if I was to give a khutbah now to the people of Sudan, or if you were told to give a khutbah to people of Sudan, what message would you give them? What is it that they should be looking forward to? Or, it's chaos. It's a mess.
It is a mess. To the people of Sudan, it's about, what's the phrase? Seeing the wood between the trees or something like that. Don't be fooled by what's going on. Don't take sides between Hemeti and Burhan. They're both on the same side. They're both enemies of yourself. That doesn't make the politicians, the civilians, they're not good either. Because your enemy is not them. Your enemy is who's behind them. And who's behind them is not the UAE or Saudi. It's the UK. It's who's behind them. It's the UK and USA on all sides. So you need to pull our, if you like, public discourse. We have to force a shift in public opinion where it becomes clear we're not being tricked by this. We know who's behind this. We reject all foreign interference, and we put pressure on people within the armed forces to remove those agents on top of them. Both sides, as in both branches, if you like, within the RSF and within the army, is put pressure on soldiers who are in your families. Obviously, people who are more notable and have influence, like tribal leaders in Sudan, they can do a lot more than the common man. But these are all initiatives that can be pulled together, and there's already people who do that now in Sudan.
So tribes do play a huge role there.
They do. Depend. Okay, not all tribes, but yes, some tribes are semi-political entities in and of themselves. So,
like I think,
influencing.
For instance, the rapid forces people. I mean, yes, it seems like he's getting even soldiers fighting for him from Chad, and that's because of the tribes.
Yeah, because the Sudanese-Chadian border is just the border between the French and British colony. That's all it was. But in reality, it's just cutting through tribes. So they're the same people on both sides of the border anyway.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, so it's that. It's put that pressure. We need to remove foreign interference. Nothing will work, and none of this. They're going to help us during our democratic. They're not going to help us during any transition of anything. Those are the words they use so that you can invite them in, and then once they're in, then they're gonna mess everything up anyway because they're not here for you; they're here for themselves. So that has to go, and the only way to do that is for us to take control again. We're not in control of our country. It's that simple. We're just not in control. The foreigners are in control because the army is doing the job for them. So we need to take back our army, and then that army needs to secure the country so that we can establish a new system that is based on let me use the phrase political philosophy, not Western political philosophy. And that comes from our deen and our heritage. So that's the message to people in Sudan, which is don't get tricked by it. You need to focus. Don't take sides. They are the same side. And they are the same side because of who's behind them and who's behind them. And that's your enemy. You have to kick the influence out and transition ourselves independently, completely. Forget anyone else. No democracy, no dictatorship. Our own ideas. So we need to have that conversation in Sudan. But nothing can happen with this foreign interference. The army has to kick these people out, and for that to happen, the army has to remove its corrupt leadership. That's for the people of Sudan. For us, for Muslims in the West, for example, very quickly, is you can influence what happens in Sudan by educating people in Sudan about what the West is actually like. And what I mean by that is when these the foreign dignitaries and ambassadors and activists and NGOs and movie stars and celebrities, what they're doing is for a lot of people, because the vast majority of people who end up working for foreign agendas, they're not bought materially like some in political parties and some in the army are. They are bought. They buy into the dream, into the dream of a democratic transition, into the dream of at least finally our country will be organized and the economy is going to run nice, and we're going to have industry, and we're going to have fixed roads, and we're going to look like London, and we're going to look like New York, that kind of thing. Because that's what they're being promised by these foreigners. So that is a major tool they use to build bridges from their perspective and gain influence on the ground in Sudan. So what you can do and what I can do is actually educate people in Sudan that no, democracy isn't what you think it is. It's not just elections. It's not just accounting. It's not just the right to express an opinion against the government. Because if it was just that, then lots of countries are democratic by that definition. But that's not the case. It is legislating by other than what Allah has revealed. It is when those leftists were in power and they were trying to canceling the Quran lessons, and they were canceling all these other Islamic rules. And like one of them even like introduced that Da Vinci, is it Da Vinci? No, Michelangelo painting, the one in the Sistine Chapel, creation of Adam, the Christian side. Yeah, and he's doing as part of like history and culture. That's not our history and culture. The Renaissance isn't Sudanese culture or history. Democracy is giving power to these people. Man legislates. That's what it is. Democracy is go past the word. Yeah, part of democracy is elections. Part of democracy is freedom of speech, i.e., to the freedom to express an opinion against the government. That's part of democracy, but that's not all of democracy. All of democracy includes, like I said, legislation contradicting Quran and Sunnah. All of democracy includes LGBT issues and Sudan, which is being forced upon Sudan right now anyway by the US and the UN. Democracy means what's the word? It's Bashir used to, in his dictatorship, was government for the few, a select few who are close and friends with him and his inner circle. Democracy is just shifting who that select few in inner circle are to, just industrial backers and party donors and capitalists. That's what it's shifting it to. That's the reality is, and like here in the UK, it's pretty bad, but like in America, it's unbelievable how everything's privatized and everybody knows that everyone's bought and controlled by big capitalist companies and these massive lobbies. That's what you shouldn't be exposing to. This is not what you want, because when people ask for that, then you get these foreigners come and say, "Oh, we'll help you transition. We'll help you transition." So that's a trap. So what we can do is actually expose what democracy actually is, so that we don't want that. We don't want democracy, and we don't want dictatorship. We want a third way, our own way, based on our heritage, based on our deen, and something which we develop through ijtihad, and which is only comes through independent parties within the Islamic world. So yeah, we can do a lot to expose our like when I was in Sudan last 2 years ago, like jaws dropping. My cousins, when I was telling them that I feel a lot safer in Khartoum than I do in London, and they're like, how is that possible? Because they're like, there's pickpockets and there's people who steal they'll steal your shoes at the mosque, and some people are doing armed robberies with knives, saying, "Give me your phone with your knife." And I'm like, yeah, that's child's play. Come to London, people get killed for nothing on the streets. The criminality here is unbelievable. New York is very bad as well, for example. Expose these things so that people can see, okay, we were told lies. That's not what we want.
We just had a bank next to us just yesterday. Yesterday morning we had the bank was basically robbed. Just, one block next to us. That's how bad Chicago is getting. But Chicago is just something else, man. You just gotta walk
Chicago
around.
is yeah. So that's the point. So and when things get bad, every time things get really bad, like for example right now in Khartoum, it's because of the foreign interference. This is not something we've done to ourselves. So you have to really shed this whole like we are weak, we are disorganized, chaotic people, can't get anything right ourselves. We need foreign assistance. These problems are created by the foreign powers.
Right. There's a question that just one of the brothers, Brother Kwame, he asked, said, what sources do you recommend we read, as far as websites and articles and books, in order to, concerning Sudan?
Wallahi, and I would say the news, because a lot of what's going on in Sudan is not hidden. It's just not important. But if you follow what's been going on in Sudan since, I don't know, for a few decades right now, just follow the news, and then follow what people comment on them, whether they're analysts or how the U.S. Foreign Ministry, the Secretary of State, comments on these issues, and how political activists in Sudan comment on them. Sudan, like many parts in Africa, there's not a lot written about it, but it depends what you're looking for. Because if you're just looking if you want to understand what's going on, you just need to follow the news. Nothing is hidden, and follow the statements, press releases by activists and political parties.
Because I think even on Twitter, one of the brothers was saying that even on Twitter, even the opposition sides are literally updating and posting what's happening live on Twitter. Even
on Twitter, Facebook, yeah. That's something which, because it's. I mean, there's a lot of information on Sudan you will not get from official sources anyway, and nobody's interested enough to do like a study. But if you want to really understand what's going on in Sudan, just follow the events and have people comment on them, and follow different people. So there's obviously people from the Freedom Force of Freedom and Change. There's people from the army. Hemeti has his own account, for example, the RSF guy. And then there's obviously the Islamic political parties there as well, and you have regional commentators. Al Jazeera has a lot of different people who have opinion pieces, and this is the point. What you're looking at is opinions. Everything is opinion. Even even the events are just what the side of the event Al Jazeera wants to show you, and it's not going to be exactly the same as what Al Arabiya shows you, or Hadath shows you, or CNN or BBC show you. And that's the only way to follow it. That's the only way to follow it. And each political party is gonna give their opinion when they comment on it, and you need to be able to see all of them, to make sense of who's saying what.
Inshallah. All right, Sheikh. With that, first of all, I would like to thank you for coming on the show. That we're gonna have to bring you back. We are looking at doing part 2. I don't know if you know Dr. Abu Talha. We're going to bring him on also for more, to have a part 2 of this. We just spoke to him earlier today also. So I think it would be nice to have you and him again come back, because I don't see the conflict going down soon, at least ending soon. I mean, either it will end up in...
Inshallah it does. Inshallah it does. But obviously that's not the way the USA wants it to do. So if nothing changes, yeah, it's gonna last for a while, unfortunately.
Yes, and I think also it's very important for the Muslims to realize how easy, prey we are to Western colonialism, to Western games, to Western strategies, the game of nations. We're just a game, and we have no say in it, in the game, subhanallah. And this is something that we need to realize. Okay, I mean, like you were talking about, look, we need to become independent. We need to look at things from our own perspective. We have our own perspective, our own history, ijtihad, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Sahaba. All of this is there for us, and we have left all of it on the side, and we are looking at our own enemies as our friends. And Allah Azza wa Jal makes it very clear when He said, "Ba'da a'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim, walan tarda anka al-yahud walan nasara hatta tattabi'a millatahum." I mean, how more clear does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have to be? But when we run away from Allah Azza wa Jal, when we turn our backs to the Quran and the Sunnah, then yes, we will become, as Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Subhanallah. So again, Shaykhi, Jazakallah khair, and inshallah we will talk to you again regarding when your availability is next, to see what's the next phase of what's happening in Sudan, inshallah. And for the brothers and sisters,
inshallah,
again,
and please make dua for the people of Sudan. It's away from the politics. Life is very, very, very difficult at the moment.
Yes,
and everyone's trying to escape the capital city.
Also,
and
if you have any ways, you as you know, Islamic Oasis does a lot of work in many different parts of the world in conflict zones. Sheikh, I mean, if you have sincere NGOs or MPOs that are working on the ground, connect them to us. Please, we would love to work any way that we can help, inshallah.
Inshallah. Just Sudan's blocked out from international bank transfers. You can't actually send anything into it. So American sanctions.
But Sheikh, is that
you can help the refugees? You can help the refugees who've made it to Egypt or Chad, for example. But in Sudan,
and then I think
anyone claims they're bringing something in Sudan, I'd be hesitant. I'd be like, show me how, because.
So there is one in Juba. It seems like there's something. I guess.
South Sudan.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the areas that we have to. I mean, let us know, Sheikh. We don't know. I mean, I'm trying to figure out any way that we can help. So, inshallah, we need your information from you, because you are from there, you have been there, you understand the situation. Please be in contact with us so that we understand how we can help, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And brothers and sisters, the moment we find a way to help, we'll make sure that we are there to help. Listen to what the brother was saying, that look, we need to make dua for Sudan, and obviously this whole ummah is suffering in one way or the other because of lack of sincere Islamic leadership. And subhanallah, when you lack leadership, then obviously somebody else takes the reign, and they are taking us any which direction they want. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us the leadership that will guide and unite this ummah and bring this ummah back to where it needs to be and what needs to be doing, which is enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. Ameen, Allahumma ameen. And we'll see you guys next week, next Jummah, inshallah. Once again, Shaykhi, Jazakallah khair, Brother Yusuf.
لا لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام
نحن جيل الهمام، نحن فينا عمر، لا 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 لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل الهمام، نحن فينا عمر. صبح بدا نور ظهر، نجم وشمس وقمر، ألقى على الدنيا الدرر، هذا عمر هذا عمر. كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر، كي تستفيد من العبر، هذا عمر هذا عمر. لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر. لا لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح.